Moving on to the conversation now, we were talking about this earlier. Kenya and USA are due to open another round of talks as we gear towards signing a new trade pact between Kenya and America. And this is what we want to talk about, the pros and cons of the proposed Kenya-US trade pact. We are joined now by Edgar Odari, who is the executive director of Econews Africa. Edgar has been here before. Good morning, Edgar.
Good morning, Eric.
Welcome to the Situation Room again.
Asante.
Kenya's biggest conversation. Now, of course, the last time you were here, we were talking about the Kenya-UK Pact.
Yes.
We've also looked at, how all these pacts are affecting us.
Yes.
Our trade with our friends and neighbors in the East African community.
Yes.
So today we'll talk about this one that was there in the Trump.
We also talked about DRC at some point, you remember?
Yes, we talked about this as well.
Joining the East African community.
Yes.
So,
new bilateral trade agreement between Kenya and the United States. This is basically the conversation that's going to be taking place this week.
Yes.
It's a big one.
Yes.
Give us the background of this and what's happening this week.
So, the United States, way back, I think 2 years ago, started off, they wanted to negotiate under Trump a complete free trade agreement with Kenya. Then they started off those discussions, but, whatever happened, and Trump was not elected. And the new U.S. trade representative, Catherine Tai, sat down and decided to narrow the scope of the agreement from a full-length free trade agreement to what they're calling the Strategic Trade and Investment Partnership. So it's a more narrowed-down conversation. And they're not doing what we call market access. We're not providing market access to Americans to be able to access the market. So that's how it is.
So that's the difference.
There's a difference. A free trade agreement with the US would have been a much bigger scope. Like a complete, all the chapters that they usually negotiate would have gone there. But this is a more narrower scope.
Yes.
I'm a little hamstrung when you say narrow.
Yes.
Why don't you walk us through what a full free trade area agreement would involve?
So
that one understands what it is.
A full FTA has a number of chapters. So one of the major chapters is it has investment. So, for example, this agreement that they're discussing with Kenya does not have investment as one of the chapters. They're discussing, I think, agriculture, digital trade, labor, women and youth. Yes, about 11 chapters. Yes.
So, of what use then is that agreement if there's no investment and all these components are mentioned? So, how do they benefit from this so-called free trade?
Muga, let me tell you, the full American invasion in terms of a trade agreement, it's a monstrosity. So, you're better off, even China, when they're discussing and having these discussions with China, they actually decided to narrow down. And you say, in the first round, you're going to negotiate up to this point. Because it's a whole range of negotiations. And you have a number of things that are discussed there. So if you try to chew everything at once, you won't finish. It's very huge. Yes.
So what's happening this week?
So this week, they had a round in Washington. Now, the Assistant United States Trade Representative, Connie Hamilton, is in Nairobi this week leading her team to negotiate another round of negotiations with Kenya. So for the whole of this week, they'll be discussing, I think they've been setting the scene for a while. Now, I think the US has come up with its texts. They've developed what we're calling negotiation texts. They now want to share with Kenya and say, this is the way we should be discussing. And
they are the ones who are deciding the texts for us to trade with them.
They've developed texts. I am not sure. I've not seen any effort.
Do we have
from the
ours?
Kenyan. We don't.
Why?
Well, that's the question we should be asking ourselves. Why should we use a template that has been developed by the United States to discuss trade? You're negotiating, and they've already made the first move by giving texts.
I don't see a problem with them coming with their texts.
We should develop ours also.
There has to be a counter.
Yes.
You see, they want to trade. This is what they would like. It's like a proposal.
Yes, it's like a proposal.
So should we have ours as well?
We should.
Yes.
You know, this whole conversation sounds like it's a Russia thing. So we first had a round where we went to their place. Now they are coming to our place. So what happened when we went to their place? What did we talk about, and what were we supposed to do now when they come to our place? What's the difference?
It was like deciding the scope of what they're going to decide, what they're going to be discussing. So they look at the scope and say, okay, we have a full FTA we were discussing, but from the full FTA we want to narrow down and say we want to discuss 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to 11 topics.
Okay.
So the two teams, the Kenyan team and the American team, agreed now on the 11 topics.
Yes.
That's what happened in the US, in the Washington conversations.
Yes.
So now what's expected to happen in the Nairobi conversation?
What is expected to happen is, according to, I was speaking to the deputy chief negotiator, and she was saying they're still setting the scene. So it's not very clear, but I think they've now come with their texts. I'm assuming they've come with their texts, and they'll share the texts, then they decide how to move on from that point.
Okay.
Yes.
Who are the people negotiating for us? Not necessarily the individuals, but what do they represent? Which ministry? Is there private sector involved?
No, private sector is not involved. And that's the irony. Let me tell you, for example, in the digital trade chapter, 12 of the 15 negotiators from the US are industry representatives.
Makes perfect sense.
You know, Google, Amazon, and the likes, lobbyists. They're the ones negotiating, and you know it's a very risky thing because.
But they're the businessmen.
No. Can you imagine? We've said, when I started speaking about this, I said Kenya is negotiating with the US government. But I've told you, 12 of those negotiators are actually private sector.
Yes.
Characters.
Yes.
So we are, and you know, there's not going to be oversight by the Congress this time, because what we are calling the Trade Promotion Authority has expired in the US, where Congress is supposed to oversight the negotiation of trade agreements. So this time we are negotiating with the private sector directly.
Okay. And we are negotiating trade deals in which the private sector will play a key role, and the private sector is not represented when we're negotiating.
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
So what's a complement of our representation?
There's the PS. He's the chief negotiator.
The PS, what? Foreign affairs or trade?
PS trade.
Okay.
There's a state law office. That's the deputy chief negotiator. Some nice lady, Pauline Mcharo. There's so that's then you have sectoral leads based on those chapters. You have sectoral leads, so there's someone who's leading the digital trade chapter. Okay. There's someone leading agricultural sector and all that. So cascading that into all the chapters. Yes.
And these people have a wealth of experience in negotiating such deals.
Yes.
The fellows from Kenya. So the next question I'm going to ask you, what have they negotiated in the past?
They have negotiated the European Union Economic Partnership Agreement with the East African Community. And, you know, I used to work under, I don't know if you know Miss Odari. Odari is the executive director for ODM. That was my boss when I used to work at the Southern and Eastern African Trade Institute. And because he was busy advising the Honorable Raila Odinga, he gave me a first row seat in terms of those negotiations. And, you know, you get to see the reality of how these negotiations are actually carried out. And it's very interesting, by the way, because, you know, you come to realize this idea of getting access to those texts and negotiating in good time, it gives you a chance to respond. You're almost responding. It's like you're responding in real time in these negotiations. Otherwise, if we don't have that kind of mechanism, so like now, the way the Kenyan stakeholders have been locked out of those negotiations, then the Americans are saying, no, the texts can only be handled by government. That's a problem.
Yeah, but they are saying the text can only be, whatever it is, can only be handled by the government. And yet, they themselves have had private sector within the negotiations. And that private sector contribution is what has formed that text. Is that not so?
Yes.
And what about ours? Did we have private sector involved at our own level, at any level, at whatever level?
I think I have spoken to KEPSA, Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and my sense, I might be wrong, they don't seem to have a foothold into this conversation as much as they would.
Then we have a problem.
As much as they'd like to.
That's my take of it, based on my conversations with them. They're not here to talk about it themselves. So that's my take on it. Yes.
You know, the thing that worries me, though, here we are building an East African community. Here we are building an Africa free trade area.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Would we not be in a far better position negotiating with the US if we negotiated either as the East African community or as the Africa free trade?
Leverage, you now have it. You've gotten it, Smuga. You know, let me tell you, the economy of California is 300 times bigger than Kenya. California alone.
Yes.
California, the economy of California's GDP is much bigger than Africa combined. Now, we are not even negotiating with California, we are negotiating with the US itself, the whole of the US. You know, when you're when I told you I used to work at Siatini. So at Siatini, there's a professor, it's called Yash Sandon. He's written a book, it's called Trade is War. You know, the way trade is negotiated is like you're fighting a war. And if you look at the way he argues, he says, when you're having these negotiations, it's like you can't pit a superpower against a developing or country. You know, you can't. It's like a boxing match. You put heavyweights with heavyweights, but you don't get a featherweight and pit them against a heavyweight. You see Vita Bwana.
Okay.
That's a massacre.
So why did we begin this conversation? Why did we have a need to have a new trade negotiation in America?
So
Even
Kenya has been trading under what we call the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act.
Yeah.
It was done in 2000 by Bill Clinton. And that agreement, it's an act actually, it's not even an agreement. It's an act of the US Congress. It was passed that year. It is expiring in 2025. We've been trading under that regime for a long time.
What does it give us access to?
It gives us access to about 6,500 tariff lines. Tariff lines are basically products you can export to the US. But what has happened during this situation is we've only been able to exploit about 11% of those tariff lines since we started exporting.
As a country?
Yes. So the question I'm asking, if on a free level...
Before we go there.
Yes.
So AGOA was enacted in 2020.
No, 2000.
In 2000,
Yes.
rather. Yeah, with the 25-year timeline.
It was extended. Actually, it was supposed to expire before, but it was extended to
It was extended
2025.
again to 2025.
Yes.
Was it only with Kenya? Was it only benefiting Kenya? Was it
About
benefiting
40 African countries.
Okay.
Yes.
But there was no negotiation.
There was no negotiation. It was a unilateral thing by the US.
It was just America looking at saying how we can support these small guys.
Yes.
And they came up with it.
Yes.
So ahead of the expiry of this AGOA
Yes.
in 2025
Yes.
is why now the need to maintain access to the American market.
But the other African countries also need access to the American
It's okay.
market.
Yeah, they can do that.
Yes.
But it's where Kenya saw a need to run ahead and maintain this.
It's
deal.
madness.
Was it Kenya that initiated this talk, or was it Kenya and America that initiated it?
Let me tell you the funny story, Chief.
Okay.
Kenya at some point even paid lobbyists to convince the US government to negotiate with it.
Okay.
Honestly.
So Kenya took the front row seat. Kenya basically took this thing, and so 2025 is coming. We don't have a new deal coming up. Can we at least secure ourselves a market in America?
But why can't they secure as a region?
No. Is that true?
It's true.
That's what happened.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Has any other African country, any other of the 11 or so African country that was benefiting 40 or so African countries, has any of them initiated talks with America?
They are pushing for the extension of AGOA, those countries.
Again, for another extension.
For another extension. Or at least if it doesn't happen to be an extension, to negotiate as a bloc. You know, we now have the Continental Free Trade Agreement.
Okay.
I'm assuming that is too big to negotiate because you have too many interests aligning. We can negotiate as the East African community. And let me tell you.
Have other countries in East Africa come up and said, can we? What I'm asking is,
yes.
Kenya initiated conversations.
Yes.
And said, let's go ahead and start negotiating with America.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
I'm just giving benefit of the doubt here and thinking Kenya maybe didn't just wake up and think, let's run ahead of the others. It's because of looking at the neighbors and seeing what the neighbors are sleeping on the job. Has any other East African country approached Kenya or gone to the East African Community Summit and said, let's open a negotiation?
They haven't.
Has any other East African country gone to America and said, let's have conversations with you
Not
ahead
to my
of
knowledge.
2025.
Not to my knowledge.
So then Kenya is basically
But now, instead of, let's say you need to look at a continuity mechanism to continue with AGOA.
Yeah.
Why not approach your colleagues first, your compatriots? Why not approach the other countries and tell them, guys, we need to negotiate beyond 2025? So why can't we come together? You see, you don't run to Americans first. You run to your neighbors and tell them, guys, let's negotiate. Kenya has not done that. So if they had made that effort and then Uganda and Tanzania and Congo refused, then you can tell me, by the way, we have tried.
since Kenya started.
Yes.
Has any of the other countries come up to say, hey, no, we'd like to join this conversation?
There are mamas, there are countries that are saying Kenya is doing the wrong thing.
Okay. Has any of them said, how about Kenya? We join this conversation.
None, because they're looking at extension of AGOA. They don't want to negotiate. You see, let me tell you, the US is a giant. This is a David versus Goliath situation. So you don't wake up and tell a giant, oh, by the way, let's sit and negotiate how we are going to have this. No, you don't do that. You tell them, can you extend the grace period you gave me for us to continue? You do that. That's what you do. I think it's a mistake.
But how many times do you want to push for an extension?
As long as they can accept it. Look, this is not a fair. It's like I told you, it's like a heavyweight versus a bantamweight.
Okay.
And you're pitting them together. So if you can get an extension before you start fighting, like I told you, trade is war. You extend that fight until you're able to grow. Meanwhile, you're eating your meals 3 times a day to make sure that you umeshiba vizuri to be able to sustain the fight.
Other 40 countries have approached America, chini 1-1, and said, please extend AGOA.
Yes.
What has America's response been?
America has said they're not going to extend. The conversation is, if you talk to government, they say, no, we're not going to extend AGOA. But if you talk to Congress, there's a willingness in the US Congress to extend AGOA beyond 2025. Some of those legislators are willing.
So the executive are the ones who are not willing, but their parliament is willing.
Yes. And parliament is the one that does AGOA.
Parliament is the one which does everything in that country.
Yes.
They're the ones who even allocate funds. As I said, they're the ones who do everything.
Yes.
Yes. You know, the thing that I don't understand is how it is that a big country like America would find it useful to deal with this banana republic called Kenya and give it so much importance. I don't understand. What is it that we have that makes it so important for them to want to have this?
Speculate. Can I speculate?
Yeah.
The Minister of Mining last week announced the discovery of, I think, 290 minerals.
They announced last week the discovery. Did they tell us when they discovered these minerals?
They've been doing, there was an aerial survey, geomagnetic survey, something. There was a survey that was done.
Yeah. When?
We've discovered minerals, so many minerals in about 15 counties. So my guess, if I was to guess, I would say they've discovered minerals. That's why the American Chamber of Commerce is busy making noise all over, saying, oh, we want to invest in Kenya and all that. They've seen minerals. That's what I would guess. Because they're doing the same thing in Congo. Let me tell you the funny thing. The US, let me just say this, and I know I'm right. I don't stand to be... The US is
You don't stand to be corrected.
Yes. I don't stand to be corrected. The US is the most selfish country on earth.
Explain what you mean.
In the US, so you know about Adam Smith. You said Adam Smith developed the
economics,
book about wealth of nations.
Yeah,
so Adam Smith talks about, in his theory, he talks about if you want a country to grow well, you must appeal to the selfish interests of each person. If each country appeals to its own selfish interests, you'll be able to grow. That is a problem. Now, the Americans have refined this further into game theory. Game theory is basically pure maths. Wanafanya mathematic. What they do something called, let me find the name for it, zero-sum game. Zero-sum game theory. So zero-sum game, Muga, means for me to gain, you have to lose. The only way I'm able to gain something is for you to lose. That's the game Americans play. But now there's someone else. I don't know if you know the works of John Nash. He is a Nobel Prize economist. He did some wonderful work on mathematics.
For a moment there, I thought he was a musician. Yes.
No, John Nash. There's a movie done about it. Have you watched the movie A Beautiful Mind? Yes, that's the guy. So John Nash says, John Nash now contradicted Adam Smith and said Adam Smith was wrong. He said, you have to look at the selfish interest and the common good. Let me explain something. He gave an example. It's a very crude example, but it's the example he gave. It's done in the movie. So you have 3 guys in a bar. They want to get laid. You get. Then 4 girls appear into the bar. 4 girls walk into the bar. Now, out of those 4 girls...
How crude is this joke gonna get?
No, it's not very crude.
Okay.
Yes. So 4 girls appear in the bar. Now, out of those 4 girls, one is very beautiful. Now, if you interpret this according to Adam Smith, each one of them will say, I want the most beautiful girl. So that will mean one of them will get laid and 2 of them will not get laid. But if you interpret it according to John Nash, it means they'll now say, okay, let's not go for the most beautiful girl. Let's go for the 3 other girls. And all of them will get laid. That's John Nash.
Let's take the break on that note. 28 minutes to 8. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the situation room. Edgar Odari is the executive director of Econews Africa. We're talking about the pros and cons of the proposed Kenya-America Trade Pact. It's called the Strategic Trade and Investment Partnership.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
We are here with Edgar Odari, Executive Director of Econews Africa, talking about the pros and cons of the proposed Strategic Trade and Investment Partnership. A delegation from the United States of America is in the country this week to continue with conversations with the Kenyan delegation. So Kenyan delegation had visited America when again, Edgar?
It was, I think, January, if I'm not wrong.
Earlier this year.
Yes.
Kenyan delegation went, and now in these negotiations, the dowry negotiations, so now they are coming to our home. Yes. Now they're coming here for further conversations. The delegation that is coming to Kenya,
yes.
How many people does it comprise?
I am not sure, but it's a large delegation. So, for example, the digital trade chapter has, like I told you, 12 negotiators from the private sector. That's digital trade chapter alone.
Are they part of the negotiations or are they accompanying the negotiators?
They're part of their negotiators. They are negotiators.
The private sector?
Yes. I don't know, the way the Americans work, I don't understand how they work. So you have 12 negotiators in the digital trade chapter coming from lobbyists in the digital trade industry. The Googles, the Amazons, and the likes. And, that would mean at least let's also put KEPSA. If you ask me, why can't we also put KEPSA in those negotiations and have them?
Edgar, are you sure that the private sector is involved in
I am very sure.
So that in the delegation, the conversation in the room
yes.
will be officials from the government of Kenya and from the
negotiators.
Across the table on
yes.
the other side
yes.
will be private sector.
No, they are not called private sector. They've been given designation to negotiate on behalf of government. So assuming, let's say the government wants to make Edgar a negotiator.
Yeah.
I am given official credentials and I become a negotiator. When I go there, I don't go as Edgar from Econews Africa. I go as Edgar
representing
the government of Kenya.
Okay.
So that's what is happening.
Okay.
Yes.
And Kenya, all the people on the other side are civil servants.
Yes.
Do we have within the civil service people who are known to be good negotiators?
Yes.
Because it's a scale. It's not that you've got a job, so you go and negotiate.
Let me tell you, Kenya has negotiators. I'll give you an example. There's Ambassador Nelson Dirangu. He's the immediate former chair of the Competition Authority.
Yes.
He just left. Government is changing, so they put in their people. He used to be a negotiator in Geneva at the WTO level. So if you ask me, he's retired. But if it was up to me, by the way,
he's experienced enough.
Yes. Okay. I would put such a guy in the negotiation table. You don't, just because someone is retired, you don't throw out your best minds because that you want to you are in a new government. I mean, who advises?
Was he part of the conversation? You're jumping. Are you saying he's not in the conversation?
He's not.
And the people in the conversation, I think that's what CT is asking. Do they have the requisite pedigree to actually negotiate?
No, they're actually qualified. It's just that
having a job, having a designation doesn't qualify you as a good negotiator. It doesn't, especially if your appointment is political. What it means is that you have the fundamental requirements for that position. That's a given. So, as to whether you are a negotiator, that is a completely different story.
So let me give you an example. If you take Alfred Komudo, who's the PS Trade, as the chief negotiator, and you take the pedigree of Ambassador Nelson Dirangu, it's like you're weighing different things. You're comparing apples to bananas. They're not the same pedigree.
Okay.
And what China did, if you look at China was negotiating with the US for a trade agreement, they brought in some nice, experienced guy. This is like a veteran. He would not speak. He advises the juniors, and they go negotiate. Then they come back to him and report. And when he doesn't speak, but when he speaks, his word is final. That kind of negotiation.
Okay.
That's how you do it.
But on our team, we have people who have participated in negotiations before.
Yes.
In trade negotiations.
Yes, but I don't see a team that usually, I was, like I told you, because of my work at Siatini, Kenya, I participated in trade negotiations under the East African Community, European Union, Economic Partnership Agreement. The team that negotiated there is not, I don't see them.
Let me ask you this question. This European Union Pact understanding negotiated,
Yes.
What was it about?
It was a trade agreement between the EU and the East African Community.
Okay.
Yes.
Meaning what? When we trade with the EU, what do we give them? What do they give us? How do we benefit?
So when you trade with the EU,
where's the benefit?
When we trade with the EU, let's look at horticulture. We supply a lot of flowers to the EU. We supply fruits and vegetables and whatnot to the EU, and they're benefiting a lot of people.
So flowers, fruits, and vegetables.
Yes, that's the example I can get.
Okay.
But then the EU was asking for so much. So, for example, they were asking us to remove our export taxes. If you remove export taxes, what does that mean? You're only able to export raw materials. Because if you put export taxes, it means for you to export raw cashew nuts, we slap you with a tax, raw macadamia nuts. We slap you with a tax, tell you have to add value locally. If you add value locally, you're employing more people.
Yes.
Yes. So, they were able to get that concession out of us. We removed export taxes in the agreement. We were not able to protect. There was a clause about protection of infant industries. We gave that away. So, I don't like the agreement.
So what exactly were we negotiating?
You were represented by Edgar. Ask him.
No. I was not representing. I was just cog in the wheel.
All these things.
No, you guys were there to just give them things.
We made these noises. Sometimes when you make noise. No, CT, let me tell you something. Sometimes when you make noise and you are loud, someone looks at you and says, this is a madman. But there's a method to the madness. You get my point? Sometimes you don't, when we raise some of these issues, we're not raising them because we want to antagonize government. We are saying, look.
All right.
Yes.
Let me ask a more specific question. Yes. In this group of people who are negotiating for Kenya, and let's start with your group, because you participate in it. How many people did you have in that group who had read, understood the thinking and the philosophy behind European Union negotiations?
Well, what they did, the European Union employed a negotiator for us. He was called, I think, Bernard Kagira. He was paid by the EU to help us negotiate. No, it's the truth. I have to tell you. It's not me telling. It's not my choice, but that's the way that's the way it was. Then we had other people negotiating in the room, and we had sectoral meetings. And the European Union, to be fair, by the way, the EU negotiation was a bit better because we had access to those texts. And kama sielewi kitu, I would go to talk to experts who are in the field and tell them, by the way, we have this thing we are negotiating. Can you tell us what this is?
Yes. Let me tell you why I'm asking you this. Conglomerations like the EU and America,
yes,
don't just rely on private sector and government.
Yes.
No, their private sector and academia work hand in hand.
Yes.
So when you find somebody who's supposed to be a private sector negotiator, you do not know that just in the back room.
Yes.
The
amount of academia that has gone into it.
That has gone into it before they actually make that presentation.
That's true.
And even with government, they have that same sort of backup. So it's not someone who was given a job and feels that because they've got this job, they are now the person who is best placed to do that. Now, maybe in this country, we have that arrangement. I have not heard of it, so I don't know, so I cannot speak about it. But I'm asking these questions because when you talk about negotiations for agreements, I'm looking at the recent past.
Yes.
And I'm looking at the SGR.
Yes.
Those things are negotiated.
Yes.
I'm looking at this expressway. I'm looking at things we've done.
Yes.
the roads we built.
Yes.
I'm looking at all this and I'm wondering, who was negotiating on our behalf? I have to ask that question because, yes, we see a road, we see a railway, we see all that. But thereafter, the attendant benefits that are supposed to come with the amount of money that these projects have cost, which should be reflected in the lives of people here and in our economy, one doesn't see it. So you ask the question, the people going to negotiate, what were they negotiating exactly?
It's almost like you are taking words out of my mouth, City.
I am, huh?
You are.
Oh.
Let me tell you. We
Have
need.
you heard what this guy said? That I'm taking words from his mouth. All right? Let me return them then.
So we need to have a conversation about a developmental state. Government must take charge of development and take it seriously. You know, he has his mistakes, but Paul Kagame of Rwanda seems to get things right. He's made some mistakes in the process, but he seems to get something right. We can learn examples from there. We need to talk about developmental state.
For example,
Rwanda, Dubai. You know, you craft a vision in the country, and everyone else aligns to that vision. You need alignment, so that all of us are working towards the same goal. But this idea, you know, you have rent-seeking guys. Someone is coming in to discuss a contract, but they're looking at what they'll pocket at the end of the day. You have others who are saying they want to get votes, so they're doing a project because they want to get votes. We need to have a national philosophy of what we want to do.
You know something? You know, you can actually pocket money if you wish, and the country can still benefit.
That's fine, yes. That's true. That's very true.
We don't seem to see that beyond the infrastructure that we supposedly negotiated for. Okay?
Yes.
It's like we have the road, we have the railway, but we have more problems.
Yes.
So that is why one has to question the people who went to negotiate on our behalf. What on earth were they negotiating? Or are we being unkind and that they had the job of negotiating, but they were incompetent? They were not the people who are best placed to negotiate for us.
Two things. Either we have incompetent people, or, you know, there's if you go into government, there's a very big sense of importance. There's so much title. People like titles. So kama mimi ndio nimekaa kwa hiyo kiti, mimi ndio na negotiate. I am the man. You know, so, you know, you cannot, even a junior can't question. And maybe that junior might have a much better understanding of those issues. But because the final authority is the guy on the chair who has a red carpet in his office, and you can't question him. That's the problem we have.
the power of the pen.
Yes.
So we are getting into these negotiations. I mean, they are already progressing. They had started in the Trump administration.
Yes.
They changed. Do you think which of them is better?
Which one?
The Biden deal or the Trump deal?
Americans are the same, man. Democrats,
The other one was a
Republican.
free trade agreement.
Yes.
This isn't a free trade agreement.
Yes,
This is a
it's-
strategic trade and investment partnership.
It's like, so the difference is you're negotiating maybe 40-50% of what you would have negotiated.
So we are taking just a smaller bit.
Yes.
Okay.
But let me give you an example. For example, in agriculture, we are negotiating. Let me tell you what happened in Mexico. The U.S. negotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement with Mexico and Canada.
Yep.
After implementing it for a while, 2 million Mexican farmers were put out of business. Listen to that. 2 million Mexican farmers were put out of business, and their land was taken over by American corporations who are basically consolidating that land. Is that what we want in this country?
So did the agreement allow the American businessmen to
invest in a...
No, it's basically, you see, the agreement was signed, but they never discussed the question of disciplining dumping.
Yeah.
Dumping is basically, America gives a lot of subsidies, America and Canada. They give a lot of subsidies to their farmers.
They do.
And because of that, these farmers are able to sell, they are selling at about 67% cheaper than the Mexicans. So someone brings a product to your country, and they're able to sell their product 67% cheaper than you. You take someone...
But
You're done.
I mean, I'm not an economist, but those are what you call unfair trade agreements. I mean, surely,
Yes.
it's unfair. Even
It is.
from the get-go. You don't
It
even
is.
need to be an economist to
It is.
understand.
It is.
Yes.
So for me, I know they're not...
So you're fearing that this could be another NAFTA?
Yes, we may not be discussing market access for the moment. But let me tell you something else. The agreement on agriculture that is at the World Trade Organization was written by a private company, Kagel. You know about Kagel? You know Kagel? Kajil,
I have heard
depends
of
on
the
your
name.
English teacher. So a company wrote the agreement on agriculture at the WTO.
A private entity.
Yes.
Agreement with who?
That agreement is binding all countries that are members of the WTO. Written by a private company.
Yes, but again, I have to ask this question. The fact that it's written by a private company,
Yes.
are we then imputing that this private company wrote something that would be of benefit to them
Yes,
Only.
of course.
only?
Of course.
And there's evidence to support this.
Yes.
And everybody else was blind to this.
So developing countries are at a loss because they're implementing an agreement that was written with private sector interests at heart.
You know, me, this private sector interest doesn't bother me very much.
Not a big one.
Not really.
I want to ask
No,
again.
whose private sector? Maybe that's what you should ask.
I want to ask.
Yes.
2023, 24, 25.
Yes.
AGOA comes
Yes.
to an end.
Yes.
You've said out of the 6,500 products that we had access to
Yes.
for the last 25 years,
Which
well,
only
the last
11%
20
we used.
Yeah. Why did we use only 11%?
Capacity.
Whose capacity?
Let me tell you, there's something called the Agreement on Sanitary and Phytosanitary Standards.
Okay.
That's another animal that was written by the private sector in the US.
Okay.
That agreement, let me try to simplify it. If a Mzungu comes here and buys a banana from City Market,
Yeah.
he eats it directly. Anaenda nyumbani, anakula hata, you don't even wash.
As long as it's in Kenya.
Yes.
Okay.
Since the Mzungu has come here, he's bought the banana, he eats it.
Just like the way Edgar would buy a banana
Yes.
and eat it.
Just the same way. Now, if you now want to take that banana to the US,
Yeah.
to export it to the US,
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the SPS requirement, but for example, one product requires that you treat it with methyl bromide and store under negative 10 degrees Celsius
Okay.
from farm to fork.
Okay.
Now, meeting some of those requirements, so you're telling a
Why
farmer,
are we are
a
saying-
farmer mwenye amekata ndizi, someone who's cut his banana,
Right.
you're telling him, first of all, go purchase methyl bromide. Where will we find the methyl bromide? Then you're telling him, you need to freeze that product at negative 10 degrees all the way to the time it will arrive at the farm, at
Okay.
the person who's going to eat it. It's impossible.
Why is it
No,
impossible?
it is not impossible, Edgar.
Why is it impossible, Edgar?
I'm not saying it's impossible,
No.
but what I'm trying to say is
What's
that,
the challenge? 23 years in the making.
yes,
Why? And you know that this would then guarantee these farmers access to a wider market.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Why has it not been done?
Some of those requirements, the other thing is the amount of time it takes to approve some of those accesses. So sometimes they use those rules to block. I'll give you an example. Namibia, when Hillary Clinton was here during AGOA, I was the one who wrote the civil society report for the AGOA meeting. That was around 2009. Namibia was complaining. Namibia was saying they have been applying to start exporting beef to the United States for 7 years.
Okay.
It has taken 7 years to approve them to start exporting beef to the US.
Okay.
So sometimes they use these rules to
So
block.
Namibia is now exporting beef through AGOA.
I think so, yes.
And Kenya?
No.
Why?
We have not invested in capacity.
God, see, everything you are saying is actually possible. You know why? You are looking at this subsistence farmer who has a banana tree.
Yes.
Instead of looking at the community that grows bananas. Okay?
Yes.
Because if it's the community and you want to assist them, brother, this is the 21st century. You can get mobile refrigeration. Okay? Meaning that minus whatever it is you want.
Yes.
You can have a storage that can move and go there during harvesting season. Everything you're saying can be done.
I mean, all this
But it needs commitment.
If you think
So
about
for
it,
sorry.
commitment and
Yes.
all. If you think about it, we are basically talking about even reducing post-harvest losses. It
Yes.
makes sure that
Yes.
one tree of banana and whatever bunch of bananas you get, all of them can get to the market. Today, ask any banana farmer in this country.
Yes.
How much post-harvest loss they endure.
It's significant.
How many mangoes get rotten in Makueni and Ukambani? How many? Just because,
let me-
what I want to ask
Yes,
is this civil society that is
Yes.
very active and saying, no, we should not be negotiating directly with America. We should
Yes.
have gone through
Yes.
Africa. We should
Yes.
have gone through EAC.
Yes.
Where have you been in the last 25 years and not, in fact, looking at how we can improve this 11% to at least get to 50%?
Yes.
Now, very good question. I think Maputo Protocol requires that governments invest at least 10% of their national budget on agriculture. I don't know the figures now, but it's not 10%. So, we are not implementers. We are the ones who can say, please, government, make sure you invest at least 10% of the national budget. If you take 10% of the national budget, it will be around 300 million. I'm not sure, 300 billion into agriculture.
10% of 3.6, yes.
So 360 billion.
Yep.
So if government, I don't know what the budget for agriculture sector is, but if government should be investing about 360 billion shillings in the agricultural sector, we can Makueni has proved to us, formerly Governor Kibwana, he has proved to us that you can do it. You just need financial commitment and good mindset to be able to do it.
So if we negotiate with America directly,
yes,
and we put our ducks in a row, so
yes,
we'll benefit.
Yes.
Instead of waiting for the
it's not automatic.
The day
and,
Tanzania, Uganda, now Somalia will
yes,
come in, South Sudan, until all of us agree and then go into the negotiation.
To his credit, he's not come here today. We were supposed to meet him today, Ambassador David Gasheru. There are people who have seen that vision. So I spoke to Ambassador David Gasheru and he told me that the vision, the reason why they do not want market access for the time being is to be able to grow the agricultural sector in Kenya, to be able to export to the US. That is a vision. It needs to be accompanied by action. Now, he's an ambassador there. If he's advising this government, I don't know if he's a negotiator or what. If he's advising this government, the next thing would be, put your money where your mouth is. Leta pesa, invest 360 billion Kenya shillings into the agricultural sector, invest into the value chain. Get those farmers, invest in cold storage techniques and whatnot. Try to teach them to be able to meet American standards in terms of sanitary and phytosanitary SPS standards. Then you start exporting to the US. So, for example, you're telling me, I wish he was here. You're telling me that organic salad.
What on earth is that?
No, just salad, vegetables.
But the organic
variety. Organic variety.
Okay.
It's a hot cake in New York. Forget even about the entire American. It's a hot cake in New York. So assuming we train farmers who do organic farming, and this is why we don't even need to do GMOs, by the way. If we can be able to do
just organic farming
and start growing the products that will be able to make a salad in New York, then we train small-scale farmers and tell them, start exporting to New York. We train them and give them the necessary tools, be it freezing, frozen trucks and whatnot, we give them. Then we train them and tell them, if you want to export, this is how you store it, this is how you... Everything, the entire process.
Yeah.
Why can't we start exporting so that the next person who eats the salad in New York eats from Kenya?
But Edgar,
yes,
in 1960,
yes,
people grew flowers just for aesthetic purposes and
yes,
for their own interests. We export flowers, Kenya. We export.
Yes.
And for us to export, it means we meet those standards. Whenever I see something that is being done, these complicated things we talk about, what I read is
yes,
it's doable. Somewhere along the line, there's a bottleneck that has been created, but it's doable.
City Muga, it's almost like we discussed with you before we started having this conversation. Now, there's something, look, we're exporting to the EU. If we're exporting to the EU exports its products to the US. If we are meeting EU standards,
we can also meet American standards.
We are meeting them.
Yeah.
So it's a question, the term for that is called equivalence. It's called equivalence. So if we are meeting EU standards, we are able to meet American standards.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, let's keep track of what will be happening this week. We hope to invite you maybe at the end of this.
Yes.
Come with a list of who our negotiators are, who the negotiators
Bring one of those
are,
negotiators.
all those things.
Let's negotiate this thing with them.
Yes. Yes.
Let's bring them here. Edgar Odari is the executive director of Econews Africa. We've been talking about the proposed Kenya-USA strategic trade and investment partnership.